welcome to this YouTube video. So in this video, I will teach you how to deploy a Django project to your very own VPS using Nginx and Gunicorn. So this right here is the project that I am going to deploy to my VPS. It's just a code generator app, and I could select any of the Game of Thrones characters here and click generate code. And once I do that, it just generates a random code. So what I want to do is I want to deploy this project on my VPS. Now you will notice that it is currently running on local server, on local host. And when I check my my terminal, you can see that it's running here. So I had gone ahead and I had created this repository and uploaded this step-by-step tutorial in a README file. And this is what I'm going to be following. So if you'd like to access this repository along with this README file, you can just come to this GitHub link. I'll leave it in the description and you can come and view it. Also, there are some commands and some other things that you could use. Like for example, there are some Gunicorn commands inside the gunicorn.txt, and then there's some things in the nginx.txt. So these are just some files that you could go through that would also help you to deploy. But the main step-by-step approach is in this README file, which is what we are going to be following. And it's going to teach you from setting up everything from setting up the server down to connecting your domain and installing SSL on the server. So let's begin. You are going to notice that there is something here called prerequisites. So these are just things that we need to have in place before we can actually start deploying this project. So the first thing is that we need to create a requirements.txt file. So what this means is that in our code right here, we need to create a requirements.txt file that is going to store all the libraries that we use in our Django project. You can see right here in my project that I already have my requirements file, and it just contains some of the libraries that I used when I was working on this project. So in order to create your requirements.txt file, just run this command. As you can see, I already have mine because I had already run the command. But if you would like to create yours, just run this command: pip freeze space right angle bracket requirements.txt, and make sure you run that command in your base directory where you have your manage.py file. So for example, if I wanted to run that command, I would say ls, and I'll make sure that I am in the directory where I see my manage.py, and I will just copy this just to show you how I would do it. Let me clear out my screen and I would run it. It's just going to save all those requirements back to my requirements.txt file. So that is what we need to do here. Now let's move to the next step. The next step is that we need to set up our static files. Now these are very important if you would like to make sure that your CSS files are showing and are working, and also if you'd like to make sure that your JavaScript files and your images files can be found properly in deployment, we need to take these steps. So the first thing that we need to do is install a library called white noise. So I would just like to minimize this so that I can put my terminal and my browser side by side. So I would like to install white noise. Now I already have this installed, but I will just follow it step by step. So once I run it, for me it says requirements already satisfied, but for you it's going to install it. So now that we have white noise installed, what we now need to do is we need to save update our requirements.txt file, because we had just installed a new library called white noise, because we are going to be using white noise to save our static files in production. I want you to run this command again. It's going to save the white noise requirement in your requirements.txt file. As you can see, I have mine down here. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to paste the following middleware to the middleware list. So I'm also going to come here and minimize my my code editor, and what I need to do is open my settings.py file. So the next step says that we need to paste the following in our middleware list, and it should be at the top of the list. I'm just going to copy it, and in my code I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to paste it at the top of the list. As you can see, I already had it there before, but again, I'm following the tutorial step by step. So once you do that, just paste this middleware at the top. Make sure it's at the top that you paste it. Now the next thing is that we need to ensure that our static file configuration looks exactly like this. I'm just going to scroll down to where I have my static file configuration. And you'll notice that if I zoom out a bit, you'll notice that it's the exact same thing. This is static URL. I have static URL here. And my static root is pointing to static files. And it's also pointing to static files, as well as my static files dirs. So just make sure that your static file configuration looks exactly like this. Now the next thing that we need to specify is the static file storage. So here we're specifying that we want to use white noise to save our static files in production. So I had already put it down here. So I just want you to follow step by step with me. I want you to open this page so you can copy and paste so that it's easier for you. So this is static file storage. It's white noise.storage.compress manifest static file storage. So I just want you to copy this and paste it in your code editor or in your settings.py file. I already have mine here. Now the next command that we need to run is collect static. Python manage.py collect static. So this is just going to go through our project and it's going to look for every single static file. That is CSS, JavaScript, and any picture, any media file, and it's going to put everything in one. So once I run that command, it's going to create a directory for me and save all those static files. As you can see, it says 133 static files copied to this specific location. And if I go back to my code editor, I can see that there's a new folder called static files. And inside that folder, I can see static files for the admin dashboard, as well as a library I was using called import export. So the next step that we need to take now is we now need to actually start working with our server. So all we had been doing so far is that we had just been making sure that our project is ready to be run in production. Now, there's also something else that we need to do. If you are going to be working with a specific domain, that is, if you have a specific domain that you want to connect to your VPS, make sure you add that domain to the allowed host. So let's say, for example, my domain was example.com. I would add example.com. But if you don't have your domain, if you don't have a specific domain that you want to connect this project in production, that is, if you would like to visit this project online only using the IP of the server, then what you can do is just put in the IP of the server, like let's say it's 15.60.45. Whatever. So just put in the IP of the server to the allowed host so that that specific address can save your Django project. Or if you don't care about all of that, you could just put a wildcard and leave it as star so that any domain can host, or any domain can save your Django project. Right, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so I also wanted to explain that during this tutorial, we're going to host it in two phases. So the first phase is when we host this Django project and visit it using the IP of the server. And then in the second phase of this tutorial is where we are now going to connect our custom domain to our server using our DNS settings, and then we are going to update our Nginx configurations. So we're going to first host our website on the server's IP address, where we're going to be visiting it on the server's IP address. Then in the second phase, we are going to connect our domain to the server IP address so that we can visit our project on the domain instead of having to visit it on the server IP. Okay. So now the next step is that after all those changes, you just need to push all this code to your GitHub repository. Now, I am going to assume that you know how to use GitHub. So I want you to create a repository and push all that code to it. So you can see this is the repository that I'm going to be working with. It's called Game of Thrones. And then all the code is already on GitHub. So there's no need for me to push it. Although if I wanted to push it, I would just run git add space dot. I would make my commit and then I would push it. So after pushing this code to the GitHub repository, what we now need to do next is that we need to SSH into the server that we actually want to host our project on. Okay, So the next step is that we need to now SSH into our server that we want to host this Django project on. So what we can do is, if you are using a Mac, I'm going to show you how to SSH into the server from your terminal. Also, if you're using a Windows machine, and if you're using Windows 10 and above, I'm going to show you how to SSH into your server from your command line. It's pretty much the same command. But if you don't want to use your terminal or your command line, or if you are using below Windows 10, because I'm not sure if this works on Windows 10, alternatively, you can use a software called Putty or Putty. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. So it's just an SSH client, and you can use it to SSH into servers. All you have to do is put in the details, and then it brings out this terminal for you that you can use to interact with your server. So I'm going to leave a link in the description to this page. This is for Windows users, but for Mac users and Linux users, we can just do it through the command line. All right, so I'm going to proceed. So what we can now do is we need to SSH into the server. So we need three things in order to SSH into our server. We need the IP address, we need the username of the user who is trying to SSH, and then we need the password. So what I am going to do is I'm going to assume that you already have those details. Okay, so at this stage right now, what we simply need to do is we need to SSH into the server. And using this command right here, we can SSH into the server, firstly using the username of the user that we want to use to SSH into it. And then we now also need the actual IP address of the said server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the terminal. I'm going to type SSH space root, which is the username that I want to use to SSH into the server. And I'm going to say root at, and then I'm going to come and copy the IP address of the server, and I will paste it in there, because we need to say SSH space root or SSH space the username at the IP address. So after doing that, just click enter, and then it's going to ask you to enter yes or no. So just type yes, and then after typing yes, it's going to ask you to enter the password. So I saved the password in my code editor. I'm just going to go and copy it right now, and I'll paste it in there. Now note that it's not showing because of a security reason, but it actually pasted. So once you paste that and enter, you'll see that you have been logged into the server, and I can see it says root at green cloud. So I'm just going to clear the screen right here, and I'll say ls, and I would like to cd dot dot, that is go back to the previous directory. And when I say ls, you can see the contents of this current directory, and this is a Linux Ubuntu server. So that is why we can see all these different directories and all these different directories right there. So we need to move on to the next step. The next step is that we need to update the packages and resources and upgrade the packages and resources that are present inside this this server. So that's why I copied those commands and I pasted them and pressed enter. Now it's going to ask you whether you want to add those additional resources, but just press Y and press enter, and you'll notice that all these resources are getting installed for us onto the server. So I'm just going to pause here and wait until it's done. So right now the installation worked successfully, so I'll just clear out my screen here, and then the next step that we need to take is that we need to install Python and pip, because it's obviously a Django project. So I'm just going to paste those commands, and those will help us install pip and Python inside our server on our VPS, I mean. So it's just going to install all those. All right, so Python and pip seem to have installed right now. So we're going to move on to the next step in the README file. The next step is that we need to create a virtual environment. So just copy this line right here and paste it. Now, when we paste it, it says virtual env command not found. So what we just need to do is we need to install this library. So run pip3 install virtual env, and that should install this library for us. So once that has been installed, what we just need to do is run that command again. And this is going to create a new virtual environment inside the My Projects directory. Now, what we need to do is we need to activate that virtual environment. I'm going to copy this command here from the README file, and I will paste it. So once I paste it, you can see now that, okay, let me just clear out my screen. Once I paste it, you can see now that the virtual environment has been activated. So we are currently inside the virtual environment. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go to this location of where our virtual environment was created at. I'm just going to paste that command, cd opt /my project. And then the next step we need to do is we need to make a directory. I'm going to explain why we're doing this. We need to make a different directory inside this My Projects directory. And we need to call it My Project. And then after doing that, we need to cd into My Project. So there is a little explanation here. It may seem redundant to have two directories with the same name. However, it makes sense so that your virtual environment name and project's name are the same. So right now, our virtual environment name is called My Project, and the folder housing our actual Django project is also called My Project. Now that we are inside this My Projects directory, what we need to do is we need to check if Git is installed. It probably isn't, but I'm going to paste that command called git status. Now it says bash git command not found. So it's trying to tell us that Git isn't installed and it doesn't recognize what that command is. So we need to install Git, and we install Git by running sudo apt -get install Git. I'm just going to paste that. And once I paste that, it's going to ask me if I want to install these additional resources, and I'm going to click yes. So with that, we have Git installed. The next thing that we need to do is that we now actually need to clone our project, which we had pushed to the GitHub repository. So remember I told you that this is right where my GitHub repository is. So I'm just going to click code, and I'll copy this URL that has been provided to us. And then what I now simply need to do, according to the README file, is that we need to clone this project we need to clone our repository into the My Project directory. So I'm going to just run the command git space clone, and I will paste the repository URL. So once I do that, it's just going to clone the repository into this directory for us. Let me clear out my screen. So what we now simply need to do is I'm just going to say ls, and then I can see that my repository is already there called Game of Thrones. And if I come here, you can see that the repository name is called Game of Thrones. So we cloned it successfully. The next step is that we need to cd into this directory. Now, once I say ls, I can see all the files and directories that are inside my Django project. I can see the manage.py file. I can see the static files that we got from collecting static. I can see my requirements file. Now, this is where we actually make use of our requirements file. Because we know all the libraries that we used in our project reside inside this requirements file, we just need to install all those libraries. So we do that by running this command. I'm just going to copy it. Pip install -r requirements.txt. So once I run that, it's just going to go through the file and install every single library inside that file for us. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to install Gunicorn. I'm guessing Gunicorn was in my requirements, but for you, it might not be there. So I want you to run, let me clear up my screen. I want you to run the command pip install Gunicorn. So we're going to be using Gunicorn to save our Django project in this production on our server, and you are going to see how that will work. Now, the next step is that we need to install Nginx, because Nginx is going to be the server that we're going to be using to listen for incoming requests. And then we're going to use Nginx to actually save our Django project. It's going to help us proxy the request, and you'll see how it works. So what we need to do is, the next step is we need to go to our Nginx configuration, and we need to install Nginx. I'm just going to copy this command, and I'll paste it. And it's going to help us install Nginx on the server. Now type Y. So it's just going to go through all this installation. And once it's done, I'll clear out my screen. Now the next step that we need to take is we need to start making changes to our Nginx configuration, or we need to start working on our Nginx configuration. I'm going to copy this command and I'll paste it. So make sure you copy the exact same thing. Sudo nano etc nginx site available and then my project. So once you run that, it's going to open this terminal based editor that we can use to edit files. So I just want you to scroll down and copy this entire configuration, and I will be showing you the required things that you need to change. So after copying this entire configuration, just paste it right here. And then the first thing that we need to change is that we need to change this server name to our actual IP address of our server. I'm going to come back to my code editor where I had my IP address, and I'll just copy it and come back to my terminal. So I'm going to replace this your IP with my actual server IP address. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to change this access log. You need to, or you can make it whatever you want, but I'm just going to leave mine as website name, or I can change this to tutorial deploy log, tutorial deploy .log. So I'll leave it like that. Now the next thing that we need to specify is the path to our static files. Now in order for our static files to be found and loaded properly, we need to point this to the proper location of where our static files are. Now if I come to my project, you'll notice that I have a directory called static files because I had already run the command collect static. So I'm just going to tell Nginx right here to look into this particular folder for all the static files that I have used in my project. So because I ran collect static, Django compiled all the static files in my project and kept it inside the static files directory. So instead of linking to the normal static folder, I'm just going to tell Nginx to look at this static files directory that contains all my static files, my CSS, JavaScript, images, and you should also do the same. So you notice that it is inside the Game of Thrones folder and it is called static files. So I am just going to come over here and I am going to replace this path to static files. I'll replace it with my repo name, and it is Game of Thrones, and it is /static files. STATICFILES. So it is /static files. Now that is pretty much all we need to change for now inside. Let me just remove this trailing /. That is pretty much all we need to change currently inside this file. So if you'd like to save and exit it, I want you to first type Ctrl X, then you press Y, and then you press enter. And that should save all the configurations that we had just done in our Nginx configuration file. So now the next step is that we need to set up a symbolic link in this specific directory that points to the configuration file. So this is how Nginx knows this site is active. So we need to change directories to this location. So I am going to run this command, and I'm going to paste it and run it. So right now I am inside this directory, site enabled. So what we just simply need to do is we create a symbolic link by running this command. I'm going to paste it right there and hit enter. Now the next thing that we need to do is we also need to edit a specific file, and that file is the nginx.conf file. I'm going to copy this path, and you should also copy the path. Let me clear out my screen, and I'll run the command sudo space nano, and I'll paste the path that I just copied. Now once I press enter, it's going to open this file for me. So what I need to do is, or what we need to do is, we need to uncomment this line that says server names hash buckets _ size is 64. I'm just going to look for that line, and I can see that it is right here. I'm just going to remove this comment. Now, again, if we want to save it, we do Ctrl X, press Y, and press Enter. Now, the next step that we need to take is that we now need to restart Nginx. So once I copy that, I'm just going to come to my terminal and I'll paste it. Sudo service Nginx restart. So once I run that, that should help us restart Nginx. Now, the next step and the seventh step is that we need to adjust the firewall. So before testing Nginx, the firewall software needs to be adjusted to allow access to the service. Nginx registers itself as a service with UFW upon installation, making it straightforward to allow Nginx access. UFW stands for uncomplicated firewall. So what we need to do first of all is install this UFW or complicated firewall. I'm just going to press Y, and then it's going to install that for us. So again, in the future, if you would like to deploy to a VPS, you could always refer back to this file, and it's something that I personally use. So the next step is that we need to run this command and allow request on 8000, port 8000. I'm just going to paste that, and then once I run that, it's going to say rules updated and rules added. So what we now simply need to do after that is we need to again restart Nginx. So I'm going to paste that command to restart Nginx, and then once I run that, it's going to restart it for us. Now that should be all the configuration that we need to do in order to visit our Django project on our server's IP address. Now, I told you in the next phase where I'm going to talk about how to connect a custom domain to your server where you can visit your Django project on your custom domain. So before we do that, we need to see how we can visit our Django project on our server's IP address. So I want you to seed it to where your project is. So I'm going to paste this command, cd opt my project, then /. Mine was called Game of Thrones. So I'm going to press enter. Now once you are there, this is where we now use Gunicorn in order to save our Django project. So I'm going to copy this command right here, and I'll paste it. The command is Gunicorn space --bind space 0.0.0.0 colon port 8000. Now the only thing that we need to replace here is this project _ name. We need to change this to the actual name of our Django project. And if I check mine, the name of my Django project is called Quotes Project. So I'm going to go back to the terminal and type Quotes Project. Now make sure that you are, when you run this command, make sure you are inside the directory where you cloned. You're inside the directory that houses your Django project. That is where you have your manage.py file, your base directory for your Django project. Make sure you are inside that directory. If not, Django won't know. If not, Gunicorn is not going to know which specific project you are calling. By saying codes projects.wsgi, we're trying to make reference to the WSGI file or WSGI file inside our project folder. After doing that, just run this command. Now, once you run it, what you can now do is that you can go to wherever your server IP is. You can copy that IP, and then what you can do is you can paste the IP in your browser and visit it on port 8000. Now, once you do that, you can see that I can visit my own website live right now using my server's IP address on port 8000. Now, when we run that binding command right here, we told this to save our Django project on port 8000. So that is why we need to visit port 8000 and not just the IP address in order to visit our project. So we need to actually visit it on port 8000. And I can test everything. I can see that everything works. I can generate a code. I can do whatever I want. And I can see that everything works. And if I try to visit the admin dashboard, I should be able to see my admin dashboard right here. And I can see that my static files are working properly because I had linked them well. Now, if you have any issues with your static file configuration, make sure you go back to this step and make sure that you are linking to the proper directory of where your static file is. If not, some things might not display. So right now we have successfully been able to visit our project on our server's IP address. Now, if we scroll down to where we stopped, right here, what we can now do is that in the next step we need to connect a domain. Now, in order to do this, obviously you need to have your own custom domain that you want to connect to your Django project. So I'm just going to break out of this command. And also, if you wanted to, if you want to find a way to run this Gunicorn command in the background, I'm going to show you how to do that shortly. Because if I break out of this right now, that is, if I stop Gunicorn from running and I try to visit my URL, you'll notice that it says this site cannot be reached. So what I can do is, in order to run it in the background, the command is at the bottom here. I can just copy this command and I'll paste it. So in order to run it in the background, I'm saying no hub space Gunicorn space -- bind, then the exact same thing, and then I'm putting an % at the end. So I'm just going to replace this with my actual project name, which was quotes projects, if I am not wrong. And once I run that, it's going to say no hub, ignoring input and appending output to no hub output. And if I come back and refresh, I should be able to see my Django project running in the front end, in the browser, I mean. And for example, if I break out of this no hub also, I should still be able to see my Django project. And if I refresh, you'll notice that I can still see my Django project. Now, in order to actually now, let's say, for example, you wanted to stop this from running in the background, what you can just say is you can kill Gunicorn using this command called pkill Gunicorn. Now, if I paste that, okay, let me just clear out my screen. If I paste that command right now, pkill space Gunicorn, it's going to kill every Gunicorn instance that is running. And once I refresh, you are going to notice that it gives an error. See, it gives an error because I had killed the Gunicorn instance that was running. So that is how to run your Gunicorn command in the background, so that whenever you actually exit your terminal or even close it, it's not going to bring your website down. So now we need to move to the next step of connecting your domain. So if for you guys who have a custom domain and you want to connect it to your project, if that's what you want, we can do that right here. So what we need to do is, the first step that we need to take is you need to open your domain registrar, go to your domain registrar and open your DNS settings for the specified domain. Now my domain registrar is right here, monovm, and I have opened my the page where I can manage my DNS settings. But let's see the next step that we need to take. The next step is that we need to add an A record with a name of @ pointing to the IP address of the server that we are hosting our project on. So the first thing that we need to do is copy the IP address of your server where your Django project is currently running. Then the next step is that you need to go to your domain registrar and go to manage DNS settings. That is, you need to go to your DNS configuration settings for where your for where your domain is, I mean. So once I zoom in, what we need to do is we need to add an A record. Make sure it's an A record that you're adding. And for the host name, just put the @ symbol right here. And for the destination IPv4 address, make sure you paste the IP address of your server. So what we're doing right now is that we're telling our domain, okay, anytime somebody visits you, we want you to point the person to the IP address of this specific server. So when I visit this domain online, it's going to redirect me, or it's going to take me to the IP address of my server where my Django project is running. So once you do all that, add an A record, and the name is @ and you specify the IP address to be the IPv4 address of your server. Just click add record. Now once you add record, it's just going to show there. I'm just going to close that, since I have added my updated the DNS records. Now we just need to save the changes. The next step we need to take now is that we need to open our Nginx configuration file again, and we need to make some changes. Now, I want you to note that even though you have connected your domain to your IP address, to the IP address of your server, it will probably still take a while for the DNS changes to resolve globally. In case after you finish this tutorial and you're wondering why your domain isn't displaying your Django project, you might need to wait a while just to make sure that it's not a propagation issue. So after this project and you've connected your domain, you just wait a while, from like an hour to 2 hours, to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then it means there's an issue, and you can ask me in the comment section. So what we need to do right now is we need to edit our configuration file. I'm going to copy this command and I'll paste it in the terminal. So once I paste it, we are going to be brought back to this page. Remember that we had, to this file, remember that we had made these changes earlier in order to visit our Django project on our server IP address. So what we now need to do is we need to make a few changes. So the first change that we need to make is that we need to remove this IP address that is being displayed here for server name, and we need to actually replace it with our domain name, the domain that we want to use. Now you'll notice that here in the code block, it says that you need to replace it with yourdomain.com and www.yourdomain.com. So I'm just going to go to my domain registrar and I'll copy the actual name of the actual domain that I want to point to my server. And I am going to come here and paste it. And after doing that, I'll type www.thedomainname.com. So just make sure you have these changes. Then the next step is that instead of now leaving localhost right here for the proxy pass, what we need to do is that we need to remove this and we need to replace it with our own IP address of the server. So the way this is going to work is that anytime somebody visits our domain name, for example, this is my own domain name. Anytime somebody visits it, Nginx is going to receive that request. Okay, let me go step by step. Anytime we visit that domain, the domain is going to point to our server, and then Nginx is going to receive that request. So when it receives that request, it is going to proxy that request back to our own server's IP address URL. I'm going to show you how it works. Let me just finish this. So I want you to again copy your server's IP address and then replace this HTTP with your server's IP address. And then I want you to put it on port 8000. Now, if you remember that when we had first hosted it, it was running on our server's IP address on port 8000. So what we are now simply saying is that, okay, anytime somebody visits this URL, we want you to proxy pass that request to our server's IP address, which is to this URL, which is our server IP address running on port 8000. So under the hood, this is going to receive that request and actually run, and it's going to look like it's our domain that is actually doing the work. Meanwhile, it's our server's it's this URL that's pointing to our server IP address, which is running on port 8000, that is doing the real heavy lifting. So after doing that, that should be the changes that we need to make. So after doing that, just hit Ctrl X, press Y, and then press enter. Now after doing that, we just need to restart Nginx. So every time you make a change to your Nginx configurations, we just need to restart the Nginx on our server. So press enter, and that's just going to restart Nginx for us. Now the next thing is that we need to wait for the DNS changes to propagate, and then check on your website on your connected domain. So right now, if I try checking for my website on this specific domain, it's probably going to give an error. When I try to visit it right now, it might give an error. It says bad gateway. Okay, it says bad gateway because we haven't actually run Gunicorn in order to save our Django project. So I believe it is successfully connected. So in order to run Gunicorn, I will just press up I'll keep pressing up until I find the command. So I'm going to again run Gunicorn in order to save my Django project. So once I run that and I try to visit this URL, you will notice that it's now my URL is now saving this particular website. So our configuration has worked successfully. If yours doesn't work immediately, it might just mean that you need to wait a little while for your DNS changes to propagate. So right now I can see that the URL is saving this Django project, but you'll notice that it isn't secure. So what we now need to do next is that we need to install SSL on our server. So I'm just going to go back to the tutorial and scroll down a bit. So this is the last step that we need to take in order to host our Django project successfully on this server. So in order to install our SSL, we need to install Let's Encrypt. And then in order to use Let's Encrypt, you actually need a domain name. So that is why I talked about connecting a domain name first before installing SSL on the server. So I'm just going to copy this command to install the Let's Encrypt package. I'm going to break out of Gunicorn and I'll run sudo apt install setbot. Okay, I didn't copy the full command. I'm just going to clear out my screen here and I'll run this command again. And it's going to install setbot. I'm just going to type yes. And I can see that everything has installed successfully. Alright, so right now I have setbot installed on the server. So the next step that we need to take is we need to run the following and follow the process. So I'm just going to copy this command and I'm going to paste it. And we need to, after this -d, we need to enter the domain name of our specific domain name. So I will just come and copy this one and I will paste it right there. But you need to remove the HTTP and the /. So I'm just going to go back to this tutorial. So once you press enter, you run that. It says saving debug log to, it says the requested Nginx plugin does not appear to be installed. So we are getting this error because set wasn't installed properly. So I'm going to paste this command right now on the screen and I want you guys to run it. Sudo space apt space install space setbot and then space python3 -setbot -nginx. Now I'm going to include this in the readme file. So just run that and it's going to it's going to install this requirement for us. So once I clear out the screen and I run the previous set command and press enter, it's going to say enter email address used for the urgent renewal and security notices. So I will just enter my email here. Now once I do that, I'll just press enter and it's going to ask for more details probably. So it says please read the terms and services at start. So then it says you must agree in order to register with the ACME server. Do you agree? So just type yes. Then after doing that, it's just going to ask you for some extra information, but just read through it. Here it says would like to send you an email about our work encrypting the web. So you can either choose to accept whether you want to receive or not. So I'm just going to type no in order to not receive. And then it says account registered, requesting a certificate from your domain, from gulftreasury.com or whatever domain it is. So as you can see right now, everything should be done. As it says, congratulations, you have successfully enabled HTTPS on HTTPS and / that domain. So what we can now do is that in order to test if the installing of the SSL worked, what we can do is we can just visit the domain once. I'm going to clear out the terminal, and then what I will simply do is I'm just going to run my project again using Gunicorn. So I'm just going to keep pressing my arrow up button until I find the command. I'm going to run this, and when I expand my browser, I should be able to visit this URL or this website on a secure connection. So once I press that, you can now see that it is secure. If I press this, you can see that it says connection is secure. So that is all we're going to talk about in this video, guys. We have successfully been able to host this Django project on our VPS. Now, this is very, very interesting. And if you have any question, please don't forget to leave it in the comment section and I am going to reply you. So in this video, we talked about deploying a Django project to a VPS using Nginx and using a custom domain also in order to connect our projects to a custom domain. We also talked about installing SSL on our server. So that is all we're going to talk about in this video, guys. If you have any questions, please don't forget to leave it in the description. And if you want to reference in the comment section, and if you want to reference this file, this README file, as well as this entire repository, there's going to be a link in the description where you can visit this link. Thank you for watching this video, and I am going to see you in the next one.